Welcome to another episode of SpitBallin. I'm your host AJ, and on this episode of the show, Christian will not be alongside me, but he will be back for next week's episode. But today we will be talking about headline news that has happened in the past 2 weeks since we've done our last episode, and we'll be continuing Mock Draft Mondays today with our Mock Draft 2.0. So get excited for that. That'll be after we go over news like we did last time. And with the draft only 2 weeks away, this will be our second mock draft of the podcast, and we'll have our third and final one next Monday. So this one, we will be changing up the picks a bit compared to the first one, but obviously picks that we believe are locks. We're going to stay with those picks. However, we will change it up to a degree, and then next week's mock draft will be the one that we lock in as who we think is going to go where. And with that, you can listen to the SpitBallin podcast most places that you find podcasts, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. You can also find us on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok under the handle @PodSpitBallin. That is @POD Spitballin. So to start today, we are going to talk about some of the most recent news and cover some news that has also happened in the last 2 weeks. And the most recent news was that Dontayvion Wicks was traded from the Green Bay Packers to the Philadelphia Eagles for a 6th and 5th round pick. The Eagles immediately give him a 1-year deal up to $12.5 million. I think this is a major trade that people are not realizing yet. With June 1st approaching, only being 2 months away, that is when the Eagles could trade A.J. Brown and we could see him on the move. I think this trade for Dontayvion Wicks is foreshadowing that. The Eagles brought in Elijah Moore and Hollywood Brown as well this offseason in free agency. So currently their wide receiving core is A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dontayvion Wicks, Hollywood Brown, and Elijah Moore. Therefore, I believe you're not heading into the season with all of these wide receivers, and you're especially not trading away two obviously late round picks, but still 2 picks, and then paying somebody 1 year, $12.5 million to just be your depth wide receiver 3 and possibly 4 if he doesn't outplay Hollywood Brown in training camp, let's say. Therefore, I think he is 100% going to have a very important role, and hopefully the Eagles believe that he can develop on their team. Obviously, he's been stuck behind Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed in Green Bay, but I do believe Dontayvion Wicks can be a very good wide receiver in this league next to somebody like Devonta Smith. But I think the big telltale sign of this trade is that A.J. Brown will be on the move post June 1st, and we're going to have to wait and see where he ends up. But moving on to the opposite side of the country and the AFC, Kirk Cousins signs a 5-year, $172 million deal with the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, if you don't realize how contracts work, you are like, wow, how did Kirk Cousins get away with highway robbery again after the Atlanta Falcons deal? However, that's not what this deal is. Even though it's 5 years, $172 million, this deal realistically is a 1-year deal with opt-outs after the first year. So realistically, it's about $20 million for Kirk Cousins to come most likely back up Fernando Mendoza. Could also most likely start, and then we see Mendoza come in if Kirk Cousins isn't doing so well. But I think this is a great move. I think this is an A-plus home run move by the Raiders. You're bringing in a quarterback that is just a perfect mentor type of guy for somebody like Fernando Mendoza. And I think this is going to be an amazing thing for Fernando Mendoza, being a rookie quarterback, especially if they do start Kirk Cousins over him. I think that'll be even better because now you're allowing Mendoza to sit for a little bit, study, learn from Kirk Cousins, and not throw him into the fire like most rookies are, thrown into fires most of the time. And I think this would be a great way to ease Mendoza into his NFL career and also just have a great mentor for his first year. And realistically, that contract, the way it's structured, next year, let's say if it's a great relationship between Kirk Cousins and Mendoza, the Raiders could restructure it or even allow him to hit free agency, but then bring him back on a smaller type deal. It's a very manageable contract where he'll either just, take his 20 million and then go elsewhere and be a starter somewhere else, let's say possibly in 2027. Or I think he'll end up being a backup for Mendoza if they establish a great relationship. But another quarterback that is up there in age, like Kirk Cousins, Joe Flacco, stays with the Cincinnati Bengals on a 1-year, $6 million deal. I think this is another home run, A-plus signing. This is, I mean, he's one of the best backups in football. We've seen it time and time again what Joe Flacco can do when you put talent around him, especially last year with the Bengals, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I think it's a great signing, especially with Joe Burrow being injury prone, could we say now, having two major injuries that have kept him out for a significant amount of time now in his career. So I do believe that is a great signing for the Bengals, and realistically, a guy that, might be asked to play a couple games if Joe Burrow does go down. So I think it's a home run signing for them. And then moving on to something a little sad, but good of what he's doing with it. We also got the shocking news that Puka Nacua is heading to rehab. This is great, though, in a sense that hopefully he's getting the help that he needs, and hopefully we'll be able to see him back on the football field doing football things and not hearing about him in the news about partying and drinking. And hopefully this is a great thing for him. And it's sad to see this in the news, but it's a good thing that he's at least seeking help and getting the help that he needs. And hopefully we see him back on the field next to Devontae Adams with Stafford throwing the ball, and he's the best receiver in the league again, like last year. So moving on, though, to the receiver that beat him out for Offensive Player of the Year this year, JSN with the Seattle Seahawks signs a 4-year, $168 million deal, making him the highest paid wide receiver in history. I believe this is great for Hawks. You didn't want this to drag on into the season or even right before training camp, because that's how you deal with sit-outs. They did pick up his 5th-year option and then immediately re-sign him pretty much. So I think that was a great way to just not have that cloud your training camp, cloud the season if it went into the season, and you pay a player that was a major reason why you got back to the Super Bowl last year and ended up winning it. So I think that's a great deal for JSN and for the Seahawks. And we'll see now where the wide receiver market's going to be, after this deal. Obviously, 168 is the price now. People that might not be as good as JSN, but could still garner the type of money, such as Puka Nacua, George Pickens. Those guys are due for contracts next year, and we will see what their market is after the market has been set once again. And another rookie re-signing, past his rookie contract, Trayvon Walker, who was the first overall pick of his draft. Some believe him to be a semi-bust, but I don't think so. He's been very good. He's been extremely productive, obviously, with Aiden Hutchinson being the guy drafted right after him and who a lot of people thought should be the first-round pick is why people consider him a bust. But I really think a bust is unfair to say. I mean, he's been healthy his whole career, really has not missed many games. He's only missed, I think, like 5 or 6 games in his entire career. He's had multiple 10-sack seasons. I think this is just the Jaguars locking up a guy on their defense after losing Devin Lloyd to the Panthers this year. They want to just make sure that defense is sound, and I think it's a great deal for Trayvon Walker and the Jaguars. A bit of an overpay, but it's for an edge. I mean, edge rushers are becoming one of the most highest paid positions in football because of how impactful they can be. Like guys like TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, you just see how they can completely wreck a game for an offense. So the edge rushing market will always be high, but I think it's a great deal for the Jaguars, locking down a key cornerstone of their defense. And moving on to a different way a team could handle you. Instead of re-signing you, they could cut you. Graham Gano was cut from the New York Giants. The Giants did bring in Jason Sanders, ex-Miami Dolphins kicker, and I think this was just inevitable. Graham Gano, who's had a great NFL career, I mean, his years on the Panthers were just phenomenal. He was one of the best kickers, in the league when he was on the Panthers, and even a couple years on the Giants, he was one of the best kickers in the league. He was very good for the Giants, but then obviously injuries caught up to him about, I'd say, 3 years into his Giants career is when he started not playing full seasons. But ultimately, he's an older kicker now. I think he's 39 or 40. I'll go with 39, though. And realistically, it was just something that was going to happen. You bring in Jason Sanders, and you still have Ben Sauls on your roster. You're not going to have three kickers on your roster. So it's seeing a guy that I'd say when he was in Carolina was definitely a fan favorite. When he was good in New York, a lot of people liked him. And you're seeing a guy like that probably potentially with the injuries, with the age. I'd be surprised if another team brings him in. But if a team's desperate for a kicker, he would definitely be the top candidate. So it will be interesting to see where he goes. But sticking with the theme of older guys, these guys are definitely done playing. We did see Levante David retire. He was a one-time Pro Bowler, one-time All-Pro, and obviously the Super Bowl that he got with Tom Brady when he was in Tampa. Levante David, a lifer in Tampa Bay. I could totally see his jersey being retired there. He was a legend for Tampa Bay. One of the better linebackers of his generation, I would say. Just a cornerstone of that defense always. And people thought when they drafted Devin White that him and Devin White would be a lethal duo for years to come. And then that Devin White would eventually take over that role. Obviously did not work out that way. Was very good, though, his first 2 years. But then just not as great after. However, Levante David, great career. Will he be a Hall of Famer with that resume? Most likely not. It's just not enough accolades. However, I do think he'll be a Hall of Famer for the Bucs. He was an amazing player for that organization, and he could definitely count on, I think, getting his jersey retired by that organization. And moving on to somebody that could be a Hall of Famer is Stephon Gilmore, retired kind of not silently. It was in the news, but I don't think got as much coverage as it should have. We're talking about a 5-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro, a Super Bowl champ, and a Defensive Player of the Year that he got in 2019. I mean, Stephon Gilmore has a great case for the Hall of Fame, being a 2-time All-Pro and a Defensive Player of the Year. And when he was a 5-time Pro Bowler, that is when the Pro Bowl actually mattered, and we didn't see people like Shedeur Sanders just getting put in the Pro Bowl or Joe Flacco like that happened this year. So I do believe Stephon Gilmore could easily be a Hall of Famer. He has the resume. There is a case. Will he be first ballot? Maybe not. But definitely he'll be remembered as a Patriot mostly. Obviously, started his career on the Bills, played for the Vikings at a time as well. And the Patriots, though, is where he won that Defensive Player of the Year, where he won the Super Bowl. I think Stephon Gilmore will be remembered as a Patriot mostly, but great career overall. And I do think there is a case for him to be a Hall of Famer, and we'll see what happens in 5 years when he is eligible to head to Canton. And another interesting situation, like the Eagles and A.J. Brown, is the Miami Dolphins and Devon Achane. Obviously, with the trade of Jalen Waddle that we spoke about in the last episode of the podcast, the Dolphins might not be done with their moves, and this is an interesting one, as it's just pure speculation, and obviously I could be completely wrong on this, but Devon Achane is currently, I believe, a potential trade piece for the Miami Dolphins. And this is because the Dolphins very quietly converted his salary of $4.6 million into a bonus, which now makes his contract extremely movable, whereas before it would have been a bit too much of dead cap to take on to trade a running back. But now it's movable money, definitely, and I could see them trading him potentially at the deadline if he's playing very well and they know that they're not going to pay him possibly. Obviously, he'll be a free agent next year. So if they don't plan on paying him because they don't want to pay a running back too much money, this could be a guy that does end up getting moved at the deadline if he's having a great season. Even if he's not having a great season and there's still a market for him, just because the Dolphins aren't having a great season potentially, they might just want to move on from him because they're not going anywhere and they wouldn't need him then. But if they're doing very well at the trade deadline, I would be shocked if they do trade him. I wouldn't get it. He's 24 years old. It really would not make sense to trade him unless you get a great package back, which I would really say for a running back. Obviously, Breece Hall was the guy like this last season. The Jets declined the 3rd-round pick from the Chiefs. So I really say, unless you're getting a 2nd-round pick, because Achane is better than Breece Hall, I really would not accept any deal. But this, movement of money is definitely a sign that he could be moved. And I guess I'd say for a prediction, I think the Cardinals, the Giants, if it happens before the draft, because obviously the Giants are possibly in on Jeremiah Love this draft. So if they don't get Jeremiah Love, though, I could see them maybe wanting a running back like Devon Achane. I think the Commanders, after they realize that they probably should not have gotten rid of Brian Robinson, could definitely be a potential place. And same with the Tennessee Titans, them getting a running back for Cam Ward to have a bit of a safety valve and a guy to hand the ball off to like Devon Achane would be amazing for that team. And with that, that is all the news that we are going to cover today. And we are going to head straight into our mock draft Monday. And starting with the first overall pick, obviously this is not going to change. It will be Fernando Mendoza. I don't even think I have to really explain about this. National champion, Heisman winner. They need a quarterback. This is who you're taking. And as we talked about Kirk Cousins before, I think it's going to be a great quarterback room for him there. I really do hope that they do not start Mendoza right off rip. I do hope that they start Kirk Cousins first. It would let Mendoza be able to sit for a little bit, get used to the NFL a bit compared to college. And I think it would be very helpful for his career if he does not start right away. But if he does, I do believe he'll be successful with the weapons that they've assembled for him, like Brock Bowers and Aston Genti, and with a guy like Kirk Cousins in his ear. I think it will be a successful career for Fernando Mendoza, at least a successful rookie year, no doubt, and especially with Clint Kubiak as his coach. We saw what he did with Sam Darnold this year. I do believe Mendoza will be a good quarterback in this league because of what's around him. And I think they're doing a very good job of building, stable surrounding area of players and coaches for Mendoza. So when he gets there, he has everything he needs to learn and be the best quarterback he could be. And moving on to the Jets now, pick 2. I do believe with this pick that the Jets might be shifting towards a different edge rusher. I know we went with Arvo Reese last time, if I remember correctly. However, I do think that the Jets could be going for David Bailey now. David Bailey is much more of a pure edge rusher than Arvo Reese, and this is what the Jets need. The Jets did just pick up the 5th-year option on Will McDonald, their other edge rusher, but with trading Jermaine Johnson to the Tennessee Titans, you need another edge for Will McDonald to succeed. It's how most edges succeed and break out is because they have a guy next to them also rushing the passer well. You look at duos like TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, both those guys have great seasons consistently because they have somebody of a great to elite level on their opposite side. And I think David Bailey could be that guy for the New York Jets. David Bailey is just a much better edge rusher than Arvo Reese, and he had 15 sacks this year, and I think that's what the Jets need, and I think this will be the pick ultimately for the Jets because I just don't think Arvo Reese will be as good of an edge rusher as teams are speculating him to be if that's what they draft him for. Now, moving on to the Arizona Cardinals, obviously with them changing directions with Kyler Murray to the Vikings and them not really having a franchise quarterback, unfortunately, there's not really a quarterback worth taking at pick number 3. So I do believe they are going to sit and pick here and take Francis Mayoga out of Miami. They could definitely use a tackle, and he is the best tackle in the draft, my opinion, for them. I think, to block whoever is going to be back there blindside, he is the guy to do it. I definitely think that he is the best pick here just because, obviously, as I said, would a quarterback be better? 100%. If they can get their franchise guy here, that'd be great. But most likely you're going to be rolling in with Jacoby Brissett or Gardner Minshew starting there. Protecting their blind side is the most important issue right now. Now, moving on to pick 4, I am going to go with Ruben Bain here for the Tennessee Titans. I think if he is available here at pick 4, we're going to see 2 Miami guys off the board in a row because Cam Ward, I think, will vouch for him and say that he could be a difference maker for this defense. And I really believe he definitely can be. I think Ruben Bain could potentially be the Jared Verse of this draft class, where he might not go this high. He might fall all the way down to the maybe 16 to 25 range and will be an absolute steal for a team that should not have been able to get him. However, I do believe Cam Ward could vouch for him and try to, say to his coaches and GM that this guy could be a huge difference maker for them on defense. And he was a difference maker. You watch his highlights from this year at Miami. I mean, every play in the national championship, which was the biggest game of his career, he was everywhere and straight to the quarterback. And I just think you have to be insane not to pick him and go with him as your edge rusher for the future if you're the Tennessee Titans here. Now, obviously, the Jets could take him over David Bailey. However, they seem to kind of not be out on him, but I think they're much more interested in Bailey and Arvell Reese. That's why I have Ruben Bain falling to the Titans here at pick number 4, and I do think this will be their pick. And for the Giants here, the Giants can really go anywhere. They can go corner, which would be a great pick for them. They can go safety. They can go running back, which is rumored a little bit that John Harbaugh wants Jeremiah Love. He wanted Kenneth Walker or Travis Etienne possibly in free agency. He swung and miss on both of those. So I'm going to go with a bit of a fun pick here and say that the Giants do take Jeremiah Love. I think this would be a shock pick to a lot of fans, even though there has been some rumblings about it possibly happening. I just think fans would still just be so upset. I know we went with Jeremiah Love in the last mock draft for the Tennessee Titans, but with him not being here, I think with him being here now for the Giants and the Titans going with Ruben Bain, I think this is where the Giants take their running back. And does it help them that much? Not necessarily. I don't think it does. I mean, realistically, you're getting a guy that's going to be exciting. He's going to put up fantasy numbers. He's going to put up very good offensive numbers. But you do have a lot of holes on your defense if you're the New York Giants. I don't think this is the smartest pick here. But I think it is what I could see John Harbaugh doing just to bolster that offense and complete it, essentially. Because if you get Jeremiah Love here, you now have the running back, you have a receiver in Malik Neighbors, you have the quarterback in Jackson Dart, so you now have like the core 3 positions that you need on offense. And besides offensive line, which honestly, besides quarterback is the most important, but you have 3 of the core, 2 of the core now playmakers on offense. And I think that is where they're going to go here. And now with the Browns here at pick 6, we had them going with Carnell Tate last time. I think they're going to now pivot away from a receiver here purely because of a sad thing that has also happened in the news of football. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, we don't know if he's going to be retiring. We don't know if he's going to be taking maybe a year off of football. However, he has said, which this is a great thing, that he's going to be pursuing his master's degree at Harvard. However, this is because of injuries and a scary injury that happened to him, and playing football might not be in the cards anymore. But it might be, and he might still be on the Browns. However, with the loss of Devin Bush and now possibly Koramoah, I don't think the Browns can take a receiver here and leave that hole on their defense. They did bring in Quincy Williams, but I just don't think, you want to go with Quincy Williams. It's a guy that got benched by the Jets last year. So I don't think that's who you want your main linebacker option to be, like singly be him. So I do think that they will go with Sonny Styles here. I think Sonny Styles is a great pick for them here. You get a young linebacker that can be Koramoah's replacement, Devin Bush's replacement, and I think really help out a team that is definitely looking for linebacker help. And he was amazing at Ohio State in pass coverage, and even sometimes when he rushed the passer, very limited compared to when he, would just rush on run defensive snaps. But he was a much better, coverage guy, and that's what he's going to be drafted for. And he was very good coverage-wise at Ohio State, and I think could be a very good pick here for the Cleveland Browns. Now, at pick 7, the Washington Commanders, we had going with Caleb Downs in our last mock draft. I believe that they will stick with Caleb Downs. This is a pick that, they desperately need safety help. They really just need defensive help as well. But I think safety is where you got to start for this team. Purely off of, they bring in Caleb Chase on and Odafe Owe as edge rushers, so I don't think they would go edge here like a guy like Arvell Reese that, could potentially be an edge. I also don't think they're going to go corner here because they did bring in Amik Robertson. They have Mike Sainer still. Obviously not great corner room outside of Sainer still. Amik Robertson's been okay his career, but nothing great. Mike Sainer still, though, one of the better corners in the NFL since he's been drafted out of Michigan. So I do believe, they have Leo Chanel as well now after free agency. So I don't think, they would be going after Sonny Styles, let's say, if he were still on the board. But I think Caleb Downs is the pick that they have to go with, as that is the biggest hole on their defense is safety currently. They bring in Nick Cross, but I think if you get Nick Cross and Caleb Downs, that's a lockdown safety duo, and you've now solidified the back half of your secondary with Nick Cross and Caleb Downs this pick. And at pick 8, the New Orleans Saints, we had going with David Bailey here in the first mock draft. However, he is no longer on the board. So they would have to pivot here. And I think their pivot is still going to stick on the defensive side of the football. Obviously, where I'm going to go here, I think, with the loss of Marshawn Lattimore a couple years ago, they have not really had a great corner since Lattimore. And I think they are going to stick this guy at corner for the Saints, keeping him in Louisiana. Mansour Delane is going to be a New Orleans Saint, in my opinion. If he is on the board at pick 8, I think it's a home run pick if you're the Saints here. If he falls to at pick 8, you really need a corner if you're the Saints. And Kool-Aid McKinstry's been okay since coming into the league, but outside of him, you really don't have a dependent corner number 2. And Mansour Delane could even jump Kool-Aid McKinstry and end up being year 1. So I think that is the pick that the Saints will go with, and it will really help their defense out a lot. Now, heading to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are a very interesting team here, with Mahomes possibly not being ready for the start of the season. They did get Justin Fields to be his backup no matter what, and possibly maybe start a couple games. Obviously, Travis Kelce is back. And outside of that, they do lose Hollywood Brown at the receiver position. Rashee Rice has been great for them, but Xavier Worthy kind of showed this year that maybe he doesn't have it. He's good, but I don't think great. And I think if you're the Chiefs here, obviously, Travis Kelce is getting up there in age. You know that his retirement is either going to be this year or in the following year. It's coming up. And Mahomes, obviously, he's getting older. I mean, he's going to be playing for many more years, but he is getting older. And I think if you're the Chiefs, you really cannot deny that the 3 receivers that are touted as the best 3 receivers in this draft class are all still on the board here. And possibly the best one, Carnell Tate, is still on the board. I had the Chiefs taking Carnell Tate here at pick 9 this time around. We had them going with Mansour Delane, who goes pick before them. Obviously, they did lose Trent McDuffie in free agency, so a corner is something that they do need a lot now. However, I think with Mansour Delane being off the board, I don't think Avian Terrell or Jamad McCoy would be a good pick here. Just it's too high for them, I believe. And they get an exciting player in Carnell Tate that will really help out their offense in a major way. And heading to pick 10 now, the Cincinnati Bengals, we had going with Ruben Bain, who obviously went much earlier at pick 4. I believe this time around, they still will luck out, though, that one of the 3 edge rushers, I say, in quotes, that Arvell Reese is the last one left. Obviously, I've been very vocal in past episodes and today how I don't think Arvell Reese will be the greatest edge rusher, but I think this is what teams are going to try to play him like a Michael Parsons kind of off and on type of linebacker, dropping him in coverage a couple times, or also just purely edge rushing him just to, hopefully have that work out. So I do think the Bengals will luck out here and take Arvell Reese. No matter what, this is a A-plus pick, because if he does fall to them at pick 10, it's exactly like we did in the last mock draft with them taking Ruben Bain. They luck out here and get a receiver, like Arvell Reese, a linebacker that will just be a huge get for them on their defense, especially after losing Trey Hendrickson. And now talking about receivers, the Miami Dolphins here at pick 11, as we know, don't have Jalen Waddle anymore and currently have probably one of the worst looking wide receiver rooms in the league. I think it's undeniable that they will take a receiver at this pick. And we had them last mock draft taking a wide receiver, and we had them take Mekhi Lemon. However, I think this mock draft, I'm going to have them going with Tyson. I think Tyson is the best wide receiver in this class, as I've said previously on the podcast. Obviously, injuries have plagued him during his college career. However, I think he is hands down the best receiver in this draft class over Carnell Tate and over Mekhi Lemon. However, we'll see if the injuries will still plague him in his NFL career. If that's the case, will definitely not be that great of a pick here for the Dolphins. But if he stays healthy, I think he has potential to be the best wide receiver in this class and help out Malik Willis, who will need a wide receiver to definitely help after the loss of Jalen Waddle. Now, to a team that has two great receivers, the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, a disappointing season last year. And in the last mock draft, we had them going with CJ Allen to get a guy that will be a leader of your defense. And they really need that type of player on their defense. And I think I'm going to stick with the pick here. I think CJ Allen would still be a great pick for them here. Purely off of, obviously, Dylan Diamonds here, and a safety could also help them, or Jermod McCoy or Avian Terrell would also not be a horrible pick for them here. But they did take Chavon Ravel Jr. last year. They also brought in Jalen Thompson at safety. So I don't think a corner or safety is really the best pick for them here. They also brought in Kobe Durant. So I don't think they need a corner as much as they need a linebacker to play pass coverage for them. They do have Demarion Overshown, but he's obviously been very injury prone his career. But you put CJ Allen next to Overshown, and they'll be a great duo in pass coverage. So I think this is going to be the pick that they will stick with if he's available on the board at 12. And heading to pick 13 now, the Rams have this pick through the Atlanta Falcons trading it to them last year. We had them going with Jordan Tyson, who is no longer on the board and is a Miami Dolphin in this mock draft. I think we are going to change it up here and have them go with Kenyon Sadiq. I think Kenyon Sadiq could be one of the best players in this entire draft class. I mean, it's on tape of how good he is. He had a great season at Oregon this year, and I really do believe that if the Rams get a guy like Kenyon Sadiq, it is the last hole in their offense. Obviously, Tyler Higbee has been a staple for that Rams team for a couple of years, and Terrence Ferguson being a rookie tight end that they took last year. However, I believe, that Terrence Ferguson had his moments last year. Definitely not saying anything that he was bad or anything. He had his moments. I don't think he's Kenyon Sadiq, and I think if you can get a guy like Kenyon Sadiq at this pick, it is a great pick to try to capitalize on what you have left of Matthew Stafford. And you already have Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, Blake Corum. You now bring in Sadiq, and you still have Tyler Higbee and Terrence Ferguson next to him. This is there's no holes on this offense. It is an amazing offense skill position-wise, and I believe this team could very much benefit taking a tight end like Sadiq. So we are now heading to Baltimore, who at pick 14, last time we had them going with Olviega Inoue, and to be honest, I'm going to pivot here, and since he is still on the board, I think Mekhi Lemon heading to Baltimore could be a huge get for the Baltimore Ravens. This is just purely off of, you have to look at what they currently have at receiver. At receiver, Zay Flowers has been great the past couple seasons, but outside of that, Rashad Bateman has been not very dependable, and that's really it. So those are your two guys. And I think bringing in somebody like Mekhi Lemon could be huge for Lamar Jackson in this offense. Now you have Mekhi Lemon, Zay Flowers, Derrick Henry, and Lamar Jackson, plus Rashad Bateman still there at number 3. And I don't think they're going to go with the guard here out of Penn State this time, purely off of they did bring in John Simpson, and he could be a great guard of the future for them, and they could easily stick with that pick. And I debated staying with that pick here, but I think Mekhi Lemon, if he is on the board and available here, the Ravens could easily go take him, as receiver is a major need for that team. And I think this would be a great get for Lamar Jackson and very much help him out in the passing game. Now, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, up at pick 15, the Bucs could really go anywhere here at this point. A lot of the top guys are off the board, and we'll really have to kind of see where they think they should be going. But I think corner could be where they go here. It's an interesting position for them. I do also think guard is position for them to go, but they do have Ben Bredson and Cody Mouch. So I don't think you're going to draft a guard knowing that you have those two guys already there. And obviously you have Tristan Wirfs and Luke Guddick at both your tackles. So I don't think they're going to go offensive line here. Corner is a major position of need for them. After losing Jamel Dean, you do have Benjamin Morrison still and Zion McCollum, but I think you get that third guy then, and I think it's Jermod McCoy. I think Jermod McCoy would be a great pick here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think this would help them out a lot, and really you just bolster that secondary back to kind of how it was last year, having Jamel Dean. You now replace him with a younger corner that was just amazing at Tennessee. I mean, Jermod McCoy is a guy who could definitely go higher in this draft. I mean, he's a guy that I think is possibly going to be a great corner in the NFL. However, there are some reasons though why he isn't going above Mansour Delane and not going as high as he could. Purely that is because he didn't play last season and did have a torn ACL. So I do think that is why he could fall to pick 15 and not go as high as Mansour Delane does. But if he's available at pick 15, I think you should take him if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You really now bring that secondary back after losing Jamel Dean and keep it young by bringing in another young corner and Benjamin Morrison, him and Zion McCollum, along with Antoine Winfield and Tyreek Smith in the safety positions, could be an amazing DB room for the Tampa Bay Bucs. And the Jets here at pick 16, we had going with Ty Simpson last time. Obviously, they bring in Geno Smith, and we'll see what they do with Geno Smith and how that's going to go this season. You've heard my opinions about what I think about their offseason in previous episodes. So I will not go with Ty Simpson here purely off to change the pick. I do think that the Jets will look to get Garrett Wilson some help on the offensive side of the ball. I don't think it's going to be in receiver help, though. I think it's going to be purely in O-line help. I think the O-line, you cannot have a successful team before you build the O-line. Everybody knows that. The Jets have Joe Tippmann at right guard currently, who was drafted as a center, and my opinion is a much better center than a guard. They did bring in Dylan Parham, who's been not great his entire career, he's been up and down. So I don't think this is a guy, obviously he is young, the younger side of an O-lineman at 26 years old. But I don't think he's going to be like their home run left guard, possibly. I think he could be a guy that leaves after his contract's up. So I think, as I said, Joe Tippmann could shift back to center, which then Josh Myers wouldn't be at center anymore. And I think Iano would be a great pick out of Penn State for the Jets here. You get a guy that will protect your quarterback. He is hands down the best guard in this class and could go much earlier than this. Obviously, we had the Ravens taking him in our previous mock draft, which is only 2 picks ahead. But he could go much earlier. He was a great guard at Penn State, showed that I think he will be a great guard in the NFL just through how well he blocked this year and last year. He let up no sacks this year and no QB hits, and he only had 1 QB hit in 2024 and only 4 total QB hits in his entire collegiate career, and he only let up 3 sacks in his entire collegiate career. So I do think this could be a great home run pick for the Jets, and you get a guard that will be protecting whoever your quarterback of the future is, or Geno Smith for this year at least. And the Detroit Lions up at pick 17 right after the New York Jets, they can really go anywhere here. They, I think, will go tackle here with Taylor Decker no longer being a Detroit Lion. I think Penei Sewell may be moved to left tackle. That is what Dan Campbell has said. And Penei Sewell is an elite tackle in the NFL, and I do think will be successful at left tackle if he is moved there. And if that's the case, I think Spencer Fano is a great pick here for the Detroit Lions. You get a guy that, in my opinion, is the best right tackle, pure right tackle in the NFL. In the draft, but could be one of the best right tackles in the NFL next year during his rookie season. And I think this is their top need. If you take Spencer Fano here and then move over to Sewell, as you might be doing, as Dan Campbell has said, I think now you have 2 amazing blockers for Jared Goff and 2 guys that could set the edge for Gibbs. on outside runs, and I think this would be a phenomenal pick for the Detroit Lions. And now the Minnesota Vikings, we had them going with Jermod McCoy, who is no longer available, and previously we also did have the Detroit Lions going with Monroe Freeling, so we are changing up the specific tackle that they are going with here. But I don't think the Minnesota Vikings will go with a corner here now that Jermod McCoy is off the board. Corner is definitely a position of need for them. They did bring in James Pierre, though, in free agency, and they do have Isaiah Rodgers, who had an amazing season last year for them, but outside of that, that's all they got. Really, that's dependable, I'd say. And James Pierre had an amazing season for the Steelers last year out of nowhere. He really has not been great his whole career, but last year really just appeared and took advantage of his opportunities. So I do believe that the Vikings will stick with who they have at corner for now. Obviously, also Byron Murphy being there. I forgot about him being probably I don't know, maybe I put Isaiah Rodgers, though, above Byron Murphy, definitely being their second corner. So I think their corner room solidified, and they won't go with the corner here now that McCoy's off the board. What they will go with here, I think, definitely is a safety. Obviously, losing Cameron Bynum to the Colts last year, and Harrison Smith now no longer being a Minnesota Viking, you have Josh Metellus, who's great, and to get a guy next to him to solidify that DB room, I think will be Dylan Thyman out of Oregon. He is an amazing safety and really could go higher in this draft if this draft was not as loaded as it is. Obviously, Caleb Downs being the better safety in this draft class, I think Dylan Thyman will go later than him, but could definitely go higher than 18. But if he's available here at 18, this is a great pick for the Vikings. I think you get a safety that's going to come in and hopefully be that replacement for Harrison Smith. And at 21 years old, I think this is just a great pick for the Vikings to get a future safety that could be their guy for the next 10 plus years. Now, the Carolina Panthers here at 19, we had them going with Omar Cooper Jr. last time out of Indiana. I do believe that the Carolina Panthers will stick with receiver here. I think, just as I've said, we saw it last year. Their season ended on a drop pass by a wide receiver. Bryce Young had such a great year development-wise, and you really have to capitalize on this offense that you have right now. And you have Chuba Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks already at running back. You have Leggett, Tet McMillan, and Coker at receiver. Out of those three, I think Tet McMillan is obviously one offensive rookie of the year. I think is the only really reliable one. And I think you need to bring somebody else in. This time around, though, I don't think they're going to go with Omar Cooper Jr. Obviously, he had a great season at Indiana with the national championship to cap it off and had a lot of highlight plays, especially the play against Penn State this year. However, I think Casey Concepcion is going to be the pick here out of Texas A&M. I think they will go with Casey purely off he has a bit of a more proven track record than Omar Cooper Jr. He has 3 great years in college where Omar has the typical kind of 3 years of progression in college, then had the breakout year, his final year, his junior year. But Casey Concepcion has just had 3 perfect years, and I think that's where they're going to go with the familiarity and more kind of comfortable pick in Casey Concepcion over Omar Cooper Jr., knowing that this guy isn't somebody that just boomed 1 year in college because of what was around him, like Coach Signetti and Fernando Mendoza. And I think Casey Concepcion would still be a great pick for the Carolina Panthers. And the Dallas Cowboys on the clock here again. At pick 20, we had them sticking with C.J. Allen for their first pick. And in the last mock draft, we had them going with Dylan Thyman because he was on the board, but he is no longer on the board this time around. I think the Cowboys could definitely stick with safety here. Obviously, I said that they were staying with C.J. Allen at that pick just because he would probably not be available at this time. And they do have Jalen Thompson and Malik Hooker, but Malik Hooker is good, not great. They did bring in P.J. Locke, so I am going to stray away from safety this time compared to last time. And I think this team, they bring in Rashawn Gary, obviously, in the trade that they did with the Packers. They just love trading with the Packers, obviously, with the Micah Parsons trade that happened before the season started. You have Kenny Clark, you have Quinn Williams, you have Donovan Azarico as your other edge rusher right now. So I don't think they're going to go edge here. I think corner is where they could look. Obviously, I said corner is where they could look earlier. And you have Deron Bland, who has just very much regressed since his amazing season of interceptions. You have Stephon Gilmore, who you hope will be better this year and develop and be a corner that you drafted to be your number one corner. But I think to help that development, you get a guy like Avian Terrell to put next to him. I think Avian Terrell, Bland, and Ravel would be an amazing corner room. They did bring in Kobe Durant already in the offseason, but I think just getting those four guys together could be a great pick for the Dallas Cowboys. And I really believe that Avian Terrell could be the next great corner for the Dallas Cowboys. And now pick 21, the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that really can go anywhere in this draft. They could go quarterback with Ty Simpson still being here. They could go wide receiver with Omar Cooper Jr. and Denzel Boston still on the board. They could also look at offensive line, obviously, with the Steelers having a solid offensive line, but their tackles not being amazing. They could go specifically left tackle with Troy Fautanu. He actually had a pretty solid real rookie season, obviously being injured for his whole rookie year the year prior. But Broderick Jones just has not been great, and they could move tackle here. But I think if you're the Steelers, you're going to go. We had them taking Peter Woods last time with him being on the board. I think it's a great pick for the Steelers, especially that was with most of the receivers off the board already. But I do believe that Omar Cooper Jr. will be their pick here, just because Peter Woods still could easily be the pick here. And I was debating sticking with it or even going towards Lee Hunter for them, who I think could also be an amazing interior D lineman in the NFL. But I think it's a little bit too high for those two guys. And I think Omar Cooper Jr., if he falls to pick 21, and it will be the fourth receiver here in the first round. As I said before, Cooper Jr. had the year that most they were average their first 2 years, and they broke out finally in their third year. I think Omar Cooper Jr., paired with Will Howard potentially, if that's the quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, if that's the quarterback. Next to, though, DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman, Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington. This could be an amazing offense at the skill position-wise. And they have Jalen Warren already and Rico Dowdle at running back, so I don't think they're going to go there. And I think the Steelers taking Omar Cooper Jr. would be an amazing pick for whoever the quarterback is and really help out their offense as a team who struggled at the receiver position last year outside of DK Metcalf. They now, though, bring in Michael Pittman in a trade and possibly now draft Omar Cooper Jr. out of Indiana to make that wide receiver room a lot better than last year. And taking Cooper here, I think, is a great pick, especially with DK Metcalf being on the older side and Michael Pittman getting up there now in age. You're drafting a young receiver that could be your next star wide receiver in Pittsburgh. And typically when the Steelers take receivers, they end up panning out. Obviously, George Pickens being the most recent one, it didn't work out for him in Pittsburgh, but we knew he was going to be a star, and he is now a star in Dallas. And after the Steelers, the Los Angeles Chargers would be on the clock, and we had them taking Emmanuel Pergone last time. This is purely off of they definitely need offensive lineman help. We saw last year how horrible their O-line was, and I do believe that he could be the pick again. They did bring in Cole Strange, and they have Trevor Penning, and they brought in Tyler Biadasz at center. They obviously have the two great tackles in Slater and Joe Alt. However, they are still kind of missing a guard, I think, because Cole Strange has not been good his career, really. He's been average at best and just nothing too special. They have Khalil Mack. They have Tupilotu, sorry for mispronouncing, definitely, at edge rusher. So I could see them going Akeem Mesidor here or Keldrick Folk. And I'm actually going to have them go with Akeem Mesidor. Mesidor, the other edge rusher out of Miami, next to Ruben Bain at Miami, was a beast. I mean, a guy that is completely flying under the radar, I think, because he was next to Ruben Bain and people are just talking about him mostly. But this guy had 13 sacks this year, 50 hurries, and 4 quarterback hits. He played most downs, having 445 pass rush snaps and 314 run defensive snaps. I mean, he had 827 total defensive snaps. He played in 15 games. I mean, I think this guy could be a home run steal here late in the first round. And now you put him next to a guy like Khalil Mack who could really mentor him and show him the ropes of how to become an even better pass rusher when you make it to the NFL. I think this would be a phenomenal pick for Jim Harbaugh and the Los Angeles Chargers because they did bring in Cole Strange, and I don't think they need the guard now necessarily. They could definitely still stick with Prignone. I think would be a great pick still for them here. But heading to pick 23, we had the Philadelphia Eagles taking Keldrick Folk last mock draft. Obviously, with them losing Jalen Phillips, they are in need of edge rushing help. But I don't think Keldrick Folk will be the guy this time around. I am going to change the pickup here and keep them at edge, but go with Cassius Howell. I think Cassius Howell could also be a late steal of the first round, exactly like Akeem Mesidor. I mean, Howell is a pretty good edge rusher. We had him going to the Buffalo Bills in our last mock draft. I picked 26. But, I mean, with the Eagles, they are in desperate need of edge rushing help, I believe, no doubt. And I think having this guy on the edge with Nolan Smith, having Jihad Campbell and Zach Bond in your inside linebacker spot, and Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, obviously, in the interior defensive line, this would be a great pick for them, and I think a possible late steal like Mesidor, the pick before them. And him having 12 sacks this year just really showed how great he is. Obviously, he had 10 his first year at A&M, and then 4, and now back to 12. So I do think he could be an up and down player. This could be a swing and a miss by the Eagles, but if he pans out, this would be a phenomenal pick by the Eagles and definitely a late round steal here. And now the Cleveland Browns back on the clock after making that trade with the Jaguars last year. We had them going with Sonny Styles in the earlier pick that they had, pick 6. Last time we had them going with Spencer Fano here. I think that with Spencer Fano off the board, we are going to see them go with a tackle still, but not Fano, obviously. I think it'll be Caden Proctor out of Alabama. Caden Proctor, nothing too crazy, like, wow, this guy, hasn't ever let up, like, a sack. Like, no, he let up 12 sacks his first year, but then got it down to 3 and 2 his past 2 previous years. I think this is a guy that has developed in front of our eyes and could be a very good tackle in the NFL. And for a team like the Browns that have, hopefully, their franchise quarterback in Shedeur Sanders, you want to get somebody that can protect him. And I think this would be a great guy to get for the Browns. And obviously, I think they would have liked to get Spencer Fano at pick 24, as we had them getting him in our previous mock draft. But with him going to the Detroit Lions earlier, I think this is where they're going to end up taking Caden Proctor now instead. And following the Browns, heading to Chicago, the Bears now, and we had them taking Avion Terrell in our last mock draft. Avion Terrell no longer being on the board, I think this is a place now where they could really kind of go wherever they want. The Bears really had a great offseason, I would say. They didn't have to do much. They traded DJ Moore away for a second-round pick because they have the Rome Odunze, so they got a great value out of the guy that is aging and they really did not need. Obviously, with Drew Dalman retiring out of the blue, they bring in Garrett Bradbury to be Drew Dalman, not Galman, sorry, to bring in a replacement right away. So I don't think they're going to go O-line there. They could stick with corner here. Obviously, they have Jalen Johnson, who's great, in Kyler Gordon, but you did lose Nashawn Wright to the Jets in free agency, who was really having a solid coming out for the Bears this year and was playing pretty good football. But I think actually they will pivot here, and obviously they brought in Devin Bush, they brought in Cam Lewis and Kobe Bryant on the defense. And I think to pair Kobe Bryant with a guy like Emmanuel McNeil-Warren would be a great pick. Out of Toledo, McNeil-Warren has been a guy that has kind of flown under the radar because of being out of school like Toledo. And I believe he could be a guy that, next to Kobe Bryant, the defense that already has 2 great corners, and now has Devin Bush, linebacker, and TJ Edwards being there already. It's a great inside linebacking core, and then secondary, and I think he could learn from Kobe Bryant some good traits to have in the NFL. And I think this would be a great pick for them here late. Obviously, I do believe they would probably prefer getting a guy like Avian Terrell or Dylan Theinman here, as they, I believe, will be better than McNeil Warren. But McNeil Warren could be just as good or better. I mean, that's the whole point of the NFL draft. We don't really know until they're hitting the field. But they're drafting the position that they need. I think safety would be a great pick here to pair him and Kobe Bryant and have that set up for the future. And now the Buffalo Bills here, right after the Chicago Bears. I think the Bills here with their pick, I think you have to go with, my opinion, Keldrick Folk. I think Keldrick Folk could be the pick here for the Buffalo Bills. They went with Cassius Howell in our last mock draft, obviously with him being off the board now, though, to the Philadelphia Eagles. We're having them flip around here. We had Keldrick Folk to the Eagles and Howell to the Bills. This mock draft, we have Folk to the Bills and Howell to the Eagles. I think Keldrick Folk, though, would still be a great pick and possible steal here for the Buffalo Bills. Not as great as a 2025 as Cassius Howell, which is why I had him going earlier now than Keldrick Folk. But I still think this would be a phenomenal pick for the Buffalo Bills. You need edge rushing help if you're the Bills, and I think he could be the guy that helps you out. They brought in Bradley Chubb, and have Greg Rousseau, who's very good. But I don't think Bradley Chubb is the long-term answer at edge rusher next to Greg Rousseau, and I think Keldrick Folk could be that, which is why I think this would be a phenomenal pick for the Bills here late in the first round. And now heading to San Francisco, the 49ers up on the clock after the Bills. I think if I'm the San Francisco 49ers, with everything going on with Trent Williams, and you really don't know what's going to happen there, we had them taking Caden Proctor in the last mock draft. I think they are going to stick with tackle. And Monroe Freeling being here is just sometimes what happens in drafts. He could easily go higher and potentially should go higher. But Monroe Freeling out of Georgia, I mean, has had a phenomenal college career. He's only had 5 sacks his entire career. And I think this is just who you have to take with everything going on with Trent Williams. And I think is a great pick here if you're the San Francisco 49ers. You get a young tackle that, even if Trent Williams is fine and good to go for the season, he's getting up there in age. He's not going to be your left tackle forever. And Monroe Freeling could play that role very nicely for the San Francisco 49ers. And heading to the 28th pick, the Houston Texans, who had a very successful year, one of the best defenses in football, so I don't think that is where they're going to go this time around. We had them taking Caleb Banks last mock draft. I think if you are the Houston Texans, you have Nico Collins, you have Tank Dell. You really, though, don't know how Tank Dell is going to come back. I think that's their biggest concern. They obviously took Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel as well. So I don't think receiver, even with the Tank Dell question mark, where they would go here. It just really wouldn't make sense. But defensively, I don't think you really need much after how successful they were defensively last year. So I think they could go with Blake Miller here at 28. Blake Miller, I think, probably the last tackle that would go in the first round, and probably last tackle that would go out of all the top tackles. And I think he's a guy that he at Clemson was very good, only 5 sacks let up in his entire career, played most offensive snaps, and just, I think, is a guy that is going to fall because he's not the best at his position in this draft. And I do think, though, this could be a home run pick for the Texans here, taking Blake Miller. Tackle is definitely a need for them after Titus Howard was traded away, and I think this could be the guy that replaces him. So I think Blake Miller here would be a great pick for them. And moving on to the Kansas City Chiefs, we had the Chiefs going with Kenyon Sadiq being the late steal in this draft. However, we saw him going much higher to the Los Angeles Rams at pick 13 this time around. I think the Chiefs, we obviously had taken Carnell Tate just because couldn't believe he was still on the board, I think is what the Chiefs would be doing there, as he could be going earlier than that. But I think the Chiefs pivot now to DB because of the loss of Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson. I think you just have to go with a corner here, realistically. They might be overdrafting. It could definitely be an overdraft. But this is a guy that I think will end up most likely being a second round pick. He could possibly literally go here to the Chiefs or to another team in the first round late. But D'Angelo Pons out of Indiana could be their Trent McDuffie replacement. D'Angelo Pons, hands down, was the one of the best corners in all of college football this year. Mansour Delane obviously going much higher than him at pick 8 to the New Orleans Saints. We have taking him in this mock draft. But that is because Delane plays outside corner. It's a bit more of a premium position compared to what D'Angelo Pons at his height would be playing in the NFL. At 5'9", he would most likely be a nickel. So nickel is not valued as much as a outside corner. However, D'Angelo Pons could be the best nickel, I think, in the NFL next year, or one of the best. I'm not going to say the best because obviously it's a rookie, and you have guys like Trent McDuffie, which is the reason, though, that the Chiefs got rid of Trent McDuffie, as they did not think a nickel corner was worth as much money as the Rams ended up paying him. And I think right here, you're using the pick that you got from trading your, what people thought was going to be your franchise nickel corner, to now get his replacement on a much cheaper contract. So I think D'Angelo Pons would be a home run pick here for the Chiefs at pick 29. However, I could definitely see them going elsewhere just because it's a guy that isn't touted as a first-round pick and could possibly be an early second-round pick. But I do think this would be a phenomenal pick for the Chiefs here to bring in a replacement for the corners that they lost. And at pick 30, we had the Dolphins going with T.J. Parker in this draft. Obviously, we had them going with Jordan Tyson earlier. And I think I'm going to stick with T.J. Parker here. This is a position of need for the Dolphins. Obviously, you have Chop Robinson, who hasn't been as good as you hoped he would be. You do lose Bradley Chubb to a division rival in the Buffalo Bills. So I believe that you just have to address that need on defense. And they brought in Josh Uke, who's just been kind of up and down in his career. He hasn't been anything great. They do bring David Ojabo, who is a bit of a project and could potentially hit his potential if he could stay healthy and just produce. But I don't think they really have great options outside of Chop Robinson at edge, and TJ Parker could be that option. I think definitely the last edge rusher to go in the first round, most likely here. And I think the Dolphins will stick with this pick as we had them taking him in the first mock draft that we did. And I think TJ Parker would be a phenomenal pick here for the Miami Dolphins, just to solidify that edge. And heading to the final two picks, the New England Patriots and the Seattle Seahawks, the two former Super Bowl teams. The Patriots, we had going with Caden McDonald to really solidify that interior D-line, which is what they definitely need on defense. And they could go receiver. However, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, with Dontavian Wicks heading to the Philadelphia Eagles, I do think A.J. Brown, we'll get to that later. That'll be addressed later. I think A.J. Brown could be on the move possibly to this team. And I think with Peter Woods still on the board, though, they will not be taking Caden McDonald, and they'll go Peter Woods. Peter Woods, I think, is the best interior D lineman to go with in this first round. Caden McDonald, obviously being at Ohio State, had a lot of help next to him and premier defense with him. So I don't think he's going to be as good as he was in college in the NFL. I think Peter Woods, though, will be. I think Peter Woods was a very good defender for that Clemson team. And I think Peter Woods can shine in New England with a coach like Mike Vrabel. And we now see two of Clemson's best defensive guys go back to back. With the final pick of the first round, the Seattle Seahawks, we had going with a safety. Obviously, losing Kobe Bryant, that would be a need for the Seattle Seahawks. But both safeties are off the board this time around. Obviously, they do have Nick Amanawari, who could play safety for them. He obviously played a bit of nickel for them last year. They also have Julian Love, so I don't think corner's a huge need. I don't think they'd be freaking out, obviously, with those two guys off the board now. But I don't know really where they would go here then if they don't have a safety that they really want. I think really what you're going to go here is best available at a position of need. And for them, that need is going to be running back. I think running back, after losing Kenneth Walker, I don't think Zach Charbonnet is going to be the guy. Like, I just don't believe so. We saw last year that when Kenneth Walker got more carries, he was the guy, and he was the better player than Charbonnet. He's the power back, Charbonnet, most likely. Like, that's his role in an offense, and it's a great role to have, and you want that. It keeps the other running back healthy. So what I think they do here is most likely go with a Kenneth Walker-esque player and take Jadarian Price, the other Notre Dame running back, rounds out our first round here. Jadarian Price had a bit of a disappointing combine, and this could definitely tank his stock and not have him be a first-round running back. But I think he could sneak in here right at 32 to the Seattle Seahawks and be their next Kenneth Walker, hopefully. And obviously not nearly as explosive or insane of a college career as Kenneth Walker, but Jadarian Price was amazing right next to Jemiah Love. So I do think that this will be the pick that the Seahawks end up going with. If both safeties are off the board, safety I think is where they will go to just bring in that Kobe Bryant replacement if one of them is left on the board, in Emmanuel McNeil-Warren and in Dylan Thyman. But if neither's on the board, I think Jadarian Price is a great pick here. It's a bit of a reach. Obviously, it's a guy that could go in round 2, but at the same time, he does have a first-round grade. People do think he could go literally right now where he's going, to Seattle at the last pick of the draft, of the first round. And that's going to be it for our second Mock Draft Monday. That is Mock Draft 2.0. You'll be able to find this mock draft on our socials at Pod SpitBallin on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. We're going to post this mock draft for you guys to react to. You guys can comment, tell us what you would have done differently, and what you think about our picks. And to round out the podcast here, we will do what we always do. I will leave you with one last spitball, and that is, as I teased a little bit earlier, I think A.J. Brown will be a New England Patriot. Mike Vrabel will go get his guy that he drafted in Tennessee and bring him to New England, and that is why we saw the Eagles making sure they bolster up their wide receiver room, as they know it is an inevitability that A.J. Brown will not be a Philadelphia Eagle, and he will be on the move, and I believe, to the New England Patriots. So with that, thank you for listening, and you can find our podcast on most places that you listen to your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And as I mentioned before, you can find us on socials at Pod SpitBallin. You can find us on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram under the handle at POD SpitBallin. I hope you guys enjoyed this solo episode. Christian will be back for next week's episode and our final Mock Draft Monday leading up to the NFL Draft that Thursday.